She arrived without ceremony, no dramatic introduction, no announcement that turned heads. One moment the training yard was loud with cadets boasting, shoving, and laughing too hard, and the next there was a brief pause as people noticed someone new standing near the edge of the formation. She didn't look lost, but she didn't look eager either. Her uniform was standard, her boots worn but clean, her posture relaxed in a way that didn't beg for approval. To the cadets watching her, that calm read as uncertainty. In a place where confidence was loud and aggressive, silence felt like weakness. Whispers spread quickly. New girl, probably a transfer, maybe a paperwork mistake. A few smirks followed, then open stares. Some of the cadets sized her up like they always did with newcomers, running quick mental calculations based on height, build, and gender. She didn't fit their idea of someone who belonged in a high-pressure combat unit. She wasn't trying to prove anything, and that bothered them more than if she had been nervous. The environment was unforgiving by design. Every day was meant to strip people down, expose flaws, and push them past comfort. Cadets learned fast that hesitation invited ridicule. Strength had to be visible. Loud voices, aggressive stances, and constant one-upmanship ruled the space. Into that atmosphere stepped someone who didn't play by those rules. She listened more than she spoke. When eyes were on her, she didn't flinch. When comments were thrown her way, she didn't react. To the cadets, this looked like someone already falling behind. A few of them decided she was an easy target. They laughed openly now, no longer bothering to lower their voices. Jokes about how long she would last, whether she'd quit by the end of the week, whether she was even capable of keeping up. One cadet nudged another and nodded in her direction, grinning like he'd already won something. In their minds, she was a problem that would solve itself once pressure was applied. What they didn't understand was that she was observing everything, the layout of the yard, the way people moved. Who talked the most, who followed without thinking. Her eyes missed nothing, even when her face gave nothing away. She noted the overconfidence, the sloppy habits masked by bravado, the gaps between skill and ego. She wasn't overwhelmed by the environment. She was cataloging it. To her, this wasn't intimidating. It was familiar. The shouting, the posturing, the subtle attempts to dominate space. She'd seen it all before, in places far more dangerous than a training ground. But she had learned long ago that the first rule of survival was patience. Let people underestimate you. Let them believe the story they want to believe. Every second they did was a second they revealed themselves. So she stood there, the new girl, underestimated and quietly dismissed, while the cadets convinced themselves they already knew who she was. They didn't see experience in her stillness or discipline in her restraint. They saw only what they expected to see. And that was their first mistake. The shift from whispers to confrontation happened fast, as it always did in places where dominance mattered more than discipline. It started with casual blocking cadets drifting into her path as she crossed the yard, forcing her to slow or change direction. No one said anything at first. They didn't need to. The message was clear: you don't belong here. When she stopped and waited instead of stepping aside, a few of them exchanged looks, surprised that she hadn't backed down. That small pause only encouraged them. Voices rose next. A laugh, sharp and deliberate, cut through the air. Someone told her she was in the wrong area. Another said she should find the admin office and fix whatever mistake had brought her here. The words were framed like advice, but the tone carried mockery. They formed a loose half-circle around her, close enough to invade her space without technically touching her. It was a familiar tactic, intimidation without consequences, pressure applied just short of a rule violation. She remained still, eyes forward, breathing steady. That calm only irritated them more. One cadet stepped closer, tilting his head as if inspecting a curiosity. He asked how long she thought she'd last. Another chimed in, saying they didn't need someone slowing them down. The group fed off each other's confidence, each comment bolder than the last. What had started as teasing hardened into something sharper, more personal. Soon the suggestions turned into commands. Leave, go back where you came from. This unit isn't for you. Their voices overlapped, creating a wall of sound meant to overwhelm. They expected her to shrink, to apologize, to explain herself. They expected fear. When none of that came, frustration crept in. A few of them glanced around, checking for instructors, then closed the circle a little tighter. To an outsider, it might have looked dangerous. A lone newcomer surrounded by hostile cadets, cut off from help. But she didn't shift her stance or raise her hands. She adjusted her footing by a fraction, distributing her weight evenly, a movement so subtle it went unnoticed. Her eyes flicked from face to face, not in panic but in assessment, distance, balance, temperament. She read them the way others read rank insignia. One cadet finally lost patience and raised his voice, telling her to get out of here before things got unpleasant. The threat hung in the air, heavy but unspoken. A few nodded along, emboldened by the moment. They believed numbers were on their side. They believed pressure alone could break her. What they failed to see was how controlled she was. Every muscle relaxed but ready. Every reaction deliberately restrained. She wasn't cornered in her mind. She was contained in theirs. The cadets thought they were testing her resolve, pushing her toward a breaking point. In reality, they were revealing exactly how they handled stress, authority, and power. She finally met their eyes, one by one, not with defiance, but with something quieter and more unsettling confidence without challenge. No apology, no explanation, just presence. The circle held, tense and waiting, as if daring her to react. And in that charged silence, the balance of the moment began to shift, even if none of them realized it yet. The longer the pressure lingered, the more obvious the contrast became. Around her, the cadets shifted their weight, cracked their knuckles, rolled their shoulders as if preparing for something physical. Their tension leaked out in small, uncontrolled movements. She, on the other hand, seemed almost detached from the noise. Her breathing stayed slow and even, her shoulders loose, her gaze steady. It wasn't the stillness of fear, it was the stillness of control. One of them scoffed and asked if she was deaf. Another laughed and waved a hand in front of her face, trying to provoke a reaction. Still nothing. No sharp words, no defensive posture, no attempt to explain herself. That refusal to engage began to work against them. In a culture built on reaction, on proving toughness through aggression, her calm created uncertainty. They didn't know what to do with someone who wouldn't play the expected role. Inside, she was fully present. She felt the ground through her boots, noted the slight slope of the yard, the way the wind shifted the dust near their feet. She listened past the insults to the rhythm of voices, identifying who was leading and who was simply echoing. She noticed which cadets stood too close, trying to intimidate, and which hung back, less committed. Every detail mattered. Staying calm wasn't just a choice. It was a skill honed over years in places where panic got people killed. A memory flickered through her mind, not of training yards or cadets, but of cramped corridors, dark water, and radio static. Situations where shouting meant failure and silence meant survival. Compared to those moments, this was noise. Manageable, predictable, she reminded herself why she was here, why restraint mattered. Reacting now would give them what they wanted and expose nothing they deserved to see. The cadets misread her composure as stubbornness. One muttered that she thought she was better than everyone else. Another accused her of disrespect, The irony was lost on them. She wasn't challenging their authority. She was respecting the structure enough not to undermine it with emotion. Her calm wasn't passive. It was disciplined. An uncomfortable pause settled in. Without her fear to feed on, their momentum slowed. Jokes trailed off mid-sentence. A few cadets glanced away, suddenly aware of how this might look if someone with actual authority walked by. The confidence that had come so easily began to thin, replaced by irritation and doubt. They had expected this encounter to be quick and satisfying. It was turning into something else entirely. She finally spoke, just a few words, delivered evenly and without edge. Not an argument, not a plea, enough to acknowledge she had heard them. The sound of her voice, calm, steady, unshaken, cut through the tension more effectively than shouting ever could. It forced them to listen, if only for a second. That was when the balance truly shifted. Calm under pressure has a way of exposing insecurity in others. The cadets still stood around her, but the circle no longer felt tight. It felt unsure. They were waiting now, not pressing. And she remained exactly where she was, composed and unreadable, letting the moment stretch just long enough for them to feel it. The interruption came from a voice that didn't need to shout. It cut cleanly through the remaining tension, firm and unmistakably authoritative. The cadets stiffened almost in unison, the circle around her breaking as instinct took over. An instructor stood a short distance away, eyes moving from face to face, taking in the scene with a single glance. Whatever explanation the cadets had been preparing died before it reached their lips. Before anyone could speak, another figure joined him, older, higher, ranked, carrying the kind of presence that commanded silence without effort. The atmosphere shifted immediately. What had felt like a test of dominance now felt like exposure. The cadets straightened, hands snapping to their sides, expressions carefully neutral, though a few couldn't quite hide their unease. The officer's gaze settled on the woman at the center of it all. Unlike the others, he didn't look surprised to see her there. If anything, his expression carried recognition, respect. He addressed her by name, rank included, crisp and formal. The sound of it landed like a shockwave. Conversations across the yard seemed to pause, attention snapping toward them. Murmurs rippled through the cadets. Rank, her rank, heads turned sharply, eyes widening as the implications sank in. This wasn't a misplaced recruit or an administrative error. The officer continued, introducing her properly, outlining her credentials with a calm precision that made each word hit harder than the last. Operational deployments, specialized units, commendations earned in places most of them would only ever hear about in briefings. Then came the detail that drained the color from a few faces. She wasn't just experienced. She was the UN, its top Navy SEAL, assigned here for reasons that had nothing to do with proving herself to cadets. She wasn't here to learn from them. She was here to evaluate, to advise, to lead when necessary. Silence followed, thick and heavy. The same cadets who had mocked her moments earlier now avoided her eyes. A few stared straight ahead, jaw tight, replaying their words in their minds with dawning regret. The realization settled unevenly, but it settled all the same. They had surrounded, threatened, and dismissed someone who outranked and outperformed them by a margin they couldn't even measure. She didn't react to the revelation, no smirk, no satisfaction. She stood exactly as she had before, calm and composed, as if nothing had changed because for her, nothing had. The only difference was that the truth was now visible to everyone else. The officer finished with a brief, pointed remark about professionalism and respect, his tone cool but unmistakably disappointed. He dismissed the cadets with a look that promised consequences later. They dispersed quickly, boots striking the ground a little harder than before, pride bruised and confidence shaken. She was left standing with the instructors, the yard suddenly feeling much larger and much quieter. The power shift was complete, not because she had asserted it, but because it had always been there. The revelation hadn't elevated her, it had exposed them. The aftermath unfolded without drama, but it carried a weight that lingered long after the cadets had been dismissed. As they moved back into formation and drills resumed, something fundamental had changed. The laughter was gone. The careless swagger faded. Every movement now carried a hint of self-awareness, as if the ground beneath them had shifted and they were still adjusting their balance. She didn't capitalize on the moment. There was no lecture, no reminder of what she was capable of, no subtle assertion of superiority. When she was given the floor, she spoke only about the schedule, the objectives of the day, and the standards expected. Her tone was professional, measured, and free of resentment. That restraint unsettled them more than any reprimand could have. It made it clear that this wasn't personal for her. It was about competence. During training, the difference became undeniable. Where others relied on brute force or speed, she moved with efficiency. Every action had purpose. She demonstrated techniques once, clean and precise, then stepped back and watched. When she corrected mistakes, it was brief and exact, never humiliating. Cadets who had mocked her earlier now found themselves struggling to keep up, realizing that confidence without skill was a fragile thing. Respect didn't arrive all at once. It never does. It came in fragments, hesitation before speaking out of turn, eyes following her movements, a subtle tightening of focus when she walked past. Cadets who had once ignored her instructions now listened carefully, aware that every word was grounded in experience they didn't yet possess. The hierarchy they thought they understood had been rewritten, not by rank alone, but by demonstrated mastery. One by one, barriers dropped. A cadet asked a genuine question instead of making a comment. Another stayed behind after drills, quietly requesting feedback. These weren't apologies, but they were acknowledgments. She accepted them without comment, answering what needed answering, offering guidance where it mattered. Respect, she knew, was something people had to arrive at themselves. By the end of the day, the atmosphere had transformed. The unit felt tighter, quieter, more deliberate. The cadets had learned something that no lecture could teach. Strength didn't announce itself. It didn't need an audience. It revealed itself under pressure through consistency and control. As she left the yard, no one told her to get out. No one blocked her path. They made space without being told to, not out of fear, but out of understanding. She had earned their respect the only way that ever lasts, by letting her actions speak when words were unnecessary.